It's That's Enough Out of You podcast with your host, me, Bill Rader, and my co-host, who's always with me, Sean Kane. How's it going, Sean?
Billy Raids, what's happening, buddy?
We are doing great. Before we get to our topic today, Sean, boy, do we have stuff to talk about.
We do. We got a lot of stuff to cover, buddy. Go ahead, Billy.
I was just going to start off with this, Sean. I mean, we've been talking, since beginning of the year that we've got a lot going on, a lot sort of cooking up that we've been cooking up. And the first thing we want to get to is our website. It's you smell that?
It's there, buddy.
It smells like a brand new website. It's still got that new website smell. It is beautiful. It's gorgeous. It's just go to that'senoughoutofyou.com. And as soon as you get there, you'll see our logo on the front page, and there's links to everything in there. We've got some clips from shows. We've got your blog, Sean. It's tremendous.
Yeah, I mean, there's some good articles up there on the blog, Billy. I mean, we're covering everything from Sam Adams to Notre Dame fighting the Ku Klux Klan, and there's just a lot of good stuff there. And we're just happy to have it, buddy. And just, you could get a lot of links there. The links to our social medias are there, our Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. They're on the top there. You just click the link. There's a place there for contacting us, for comments. Under the blog section, you could comment. So we're just really excited about it, buddy.
And there's also a link to the next thing we want to talk about. And that is our other big launch, which is our Patreon site.
Yeah, that's correct, buddy. You could get that right there on the website. But our Patreon, we're, anything that anybody could give to help, it'll be great, because the cost of, some of these hosting sites are expensive, and just a donation, a couple bucks here and there. I mean, people pay for streaming services they never watch.
Right.
I mean, we're giving content, Billy, and if you could give a couple bucks, great. It helps us out tremendously, grows the show. And that's what we're trying to do, Billy, grow the show. And if you can't do that, Billy, if you're on social media, you can help us out tremendously by when you see a post from me, I'm all over social media, and you see one of our posts promoting our podcast, share it, like it, comment on it. If you don't have social media and you listen to our show, send it to your friends, send our website to your friends. We want to grow this community, Billy. And we're at a base. We have a really nice base right now, and we're proud of it where we're at, but we want to expand, buddy. We got big dreams for the show, buddy.
That's right. And there's different tiers. I mean, you can get in for as little as $1 on our Patreon. We have a $1 tier. We have a $3.
Yeah, and Billy, everything helps. I mean, even that helps,
Sure.
The membership numbers help.
Just going through, our tiers here on Patreon. I mean, the $4 tier, if you want to, if you have questions for the show, we'll certainly answer questions, but our Patreon members are going to get priority when it comes to that. And we already have quite a few patrons, and just want to give a shout out to our patrons so far. Ozman came through. Ozman is a patron for us. Our buddy Ange is also a patron. Let's see, Jamie, your brother, is a patron, and
Scott Hopkins.
Hop is we got him also on.
Bill, that's what I want to call, our crew is the Out of You crowd, buddy. The people that they're tired of the lies that's out there.
Yeah. And
and we have a lot of supporters, but I want to thank a lot of the people that's been with us right from the beginning. You mentioned Big Ange and Hopkins and Oz and,
yep,
and Jamie and Katie and Gene C, Joey D, Sammy, the Ozman, Lisa Pease is a listener now all the time. I mean, she's commenting.
Yep.
Yeah. And, Jim Richmond, Joe Walton, Scott Alfieri, our buddy Giordano in Rome, Italy. I mean, I'm missing so many people. Your buddy O'Shea, Hallie up in Boston, Marty Bell. I mean, we just got so many people that been with us from the beginning, and they're just tired. They want to hear the truth, Bill. And I was listening to some podcasts over the weekend, and some of the garbage that's out there, Bill, like just the stuff they're saying about the Kennedys, and I've listened to some mob podcasts, and they're just so bad, Bill. Just giving you information that's that's just nonsense. And I can tell you one thing, Bill, we might make some mistakes on this show, but the one thing we're never going to do is we're never going to lie to you just to get clickbaits.
Right.
You know, we're never going to come out and just say something that we know is a lie just because it's shock value and it's going to get us a lot of clickbaits. We're going to tell you the truth. And that's why I think we got a nice base, buddy.
And not everything that we say on here or that our guests say is necessarily popular, right? But it's the truth. And that's all that's going to come out of this show.
Sometimes the truth hurts, buddy.
It sure does. It sure does. All right. Well, that's enough infomercial, but we definitely want you to go to the website regardless. It's a beautiful website. We got so much info on there. So take a look at it and let us know what you think. There's
any recommendations people have, that'll be great,
Sure. All right, Sean, let's we got a really good topic this week.
Well, we got a very important one, Billy, the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah. As Paulie Walnut said, they put brought nuclear warheads into Cuba and pointed them right at us.
They sure did, buddy.
Christopher replied, that was real. I saw that movie. I thought it was bullshit.
Oh boy.
All right, let's hit the topic. Let's go.
Let's get into it, buddy. All right, pal. So, a lot of the information we're gonna take from tonight is from the XCOM tapes. Kennedy put this thing together, XCOM, to the secret group to go over what was happening in the crisis, and he recorded this, Bill. And the tapes are recently declassified, and now we don't have to speculate anymore on what happened and how close it was to really nuclear Armageddon, Bill.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why Kennedy recorded this, Bill. And that was because, the Bay of Pigs, he was lied to by Allen Dulles. We know that. We covered that. But also a lot of the people that were advising him to okay that mission, the Bay of Pigs, later would deny it. And they would say, well, we didn't really we didn't really, want to go in and stuff. So Kennedy wanted a record the next time anything happened, that because he couldn't trust the people around him. So he recorded these tapes, buddy. So we're going to start with the day one, because basically we're talking about a period from October 16th to November 20th, 1962. But we're going to talk about the first 7 days, Billy, where really the public didn't know what was going on, but we were on the brink. And what happened was U-2 spy plane takes clear photos of medium-range R-12 and R-14 ballistic missiles in Cuba. So now the tapes, I'm going to start with Marshall Carter, who was the deputy director of the CIA. And he's going over this with Kennedy. And he's telling him, the range on some of the missiles are 1,100 miles, which basically they could take out Houston, Dallas, Atlanta, Miami, all the way up into Cincinnati, Bill.
Oh, amazing.
Amazing. It's scary, buddy. And then you had other ones that the long range ones reached 2,400 miles, which basically, Bill, take out the entire United States except up in Seattle, parts of Washington. They couldn't reach. But I mean, this is just unbelievable. And he's going over this, and JFK asked him, are they ready to be fired? And the response was no. And that wasn't the correct response, Bill. So JFK asked, well, how many missiles do we have in Turkey? Now, that's going to be a key thing. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later, the missiles that we had in Turkey. But Defense Secretary McNamara, Robert McNamara, he says we have about 15 missiles there. And then McNamara, Kennedy asks, is there any nuclear warheads? And the CIA says they looked into that. They were looking hard. But Marshall Carter says we didn't find any. Now, that was incorrect, Bill, the intelligence they were getting, because we now know that they had 170 nuclear warheads.
Wow.
And they were saying they had none.
Yeah.
And now, Bill, the tapes get really scary, because what's happening now is everyone that's in this conference here is talking about aggression. They're talking about a strategic attack and a strike in Cuba. And the only one besides, Kennedy that was in RFK was Undersecretary of Defense George Ball, but he wasn't as vocal as John and Bobby, obviously, but he compared this strategic attack to Pearl Harbor. And Defense Secretary McNamara, he asked about how many citizens would be killed in this attack. And JFK really presses on this. So the CIA is coming back and they're saying, probably only in the hundreds. And then Maxwell Taylor, Max Taylor was Kennedy brought in as when he got rid of Lemnitzer and the Joint Chief of Staff, and he brought Taylor in. He actually ups the number. He says it's probably going to be in the thousands. And now you can see JFK is really concerned. And he would later confide to John Kenneth Galbraith, his ambassador to India. He would tell him that he was never going to prove that surgical strike. Like, that was never in his mind to prove it. But they were pushing hard for this, Bill. And it's really scary when you listen to these tapes. And what they're suggesting, Bill, on this strategic attack is a vast air attack coupled with a land invasion. Now, the problem with that, Bill, is we now know that the Russians had 45 to 50,000 troops in Cuba.
Yeah.
45 to 50,000, Bill.
Right.
That they snuck in there, and plus the Cuban army. Okay. Now, JFK at this point gets really upset. And you can hear him, like, he's upset at Khrushchev because he had a talk with Khrushchev and he told him flat out that there should be no offensive weapons in Cuba. He said, if you put defensive weapons there, that's one thing, but no offensive weapons. So clearly this is upsetting JFK, and he's really upset at Nikita Khrushchev in Russia. So at this point, Bill, this is the first time that the blockade is suggested. Okay. And it's suggested by Defense Secretary McNamara, and Kennedy really likes that idea. Okay, so he's really, putting that in the back of his mind, and it's out there. And this is where the tapes really get scary, because Curtis LeMay, who's the head of Strategic Air Command at the Air Force, who was a Kennedy, him and Kennedy had such a toxic relationship. We talk about this all the time, Bill.
Right, bombs away LeMay.
Bombs away LeMay. Yeah, let's bomb everybody.
Yep.
But he compares the blockade to the appeasement at Munich with Hitler. Now, Bill, that's the situation. Now, some of our listeners don't know. That's when Great Britain and France attempted to avoid war in the 1930s by consenting to Adolf Hitler's demand of giving up territory.
Right.
Now, for an Air Force general, Bill, to say that to the commander in chief, that is so disrespectful by LeMay, and it's disgusting, to be honest with you. And now the U.S. Army Chief of Staff says we need a full gamut of U.S. military action. And LeMay says at this point, he says, you're in a bad fix, Mr. President. And Kennedy's like taken back by that comment. And he's like, what did you say, General? And he says, you're in a bad fix. And Kennedy says, and he kind of chuckles. He's like, huh. He's like, well, you're right in there with me, General. And you could just feel the tension with LeMay and Kennedy. I mean, such a toxic relationship.
Yeah.
Because Kennedy wants peace and LeMay wants war at all costs.
Yeah.
So, and Kennedy would later make comments, Bill. He would later say, like, we call ourselves the human race. And he would say, if I had listened to my advisors, none of us would be around to tell the generals that they were wrong. And Kennedy at this point, Bill, is convinced that Khrushchev put the missiles in there. He was convinced that they were linked to the U.S. presence in West Berlin. And JFK was not going to give up West Berlin. Now, I don't want to go into too much about Berlin, Bill, because the Berlin crisis, because that's probably a whole other show. At some point, we'll probably do a show on that,
Oh,
but
yeah, definitely.
Kennedy said, the wall's better than a war. But he was not consenting on giving up West Berlin, because to him, and I said this in the Vietnam episode, he always thought Germany was more important strategic place than Vietnam was. And he felt that Khrushchev was kind of putting the missiles there to kind of bully him into giving up, Berlin, but he wasn't going to do that. So I don't know. What do you feel about this at this point, Bill? Because this is like really scary stuff when all of his advisors.
So let me ask you this, Sean, because of what we know today about Russia and their tactics, but also their technology, or I guess lack of technology. Do you think, and I mean, I know, obviously you wouldn't necessarily know the answer to this, but just kind of putting it out there, like, do you think that the missiles that they had and the technology that they had, where they could really have done the damage that they thought, that at that time that we thought they could have done? In other words, we know from history that a lot of their missiles had they launched, during the Cold War, wouldn't have come anywhere close to their targets.
Well, that's true, Bill. And the Russians always try to say they had more than they did. And
Right.
I mentioned that in the space episode when Khrushchev's son said that.
Yeah.
But I mean, do you really want to take the chance?
No, of course not. But
I mean, it's, I hear what you're saying, but I mean, they had a lot of weapons that were there,
Yeah.
and they had short range nukes too, Bill. And we'll talk about the specifics of what they actually had there. But you're right. Some of the stuff maybe it wasn't as effective as they're making it out to be, but it was still a very dangerous situation.
And I think it's important to note, for folks that don't necessarily know geography, Cuba is very close to the United States. It's 90 miles away, which, is less than the distance between like here and Philadelphia. I mean, it's very, very close.
Yeah.
So
90 miles from Miami, buddy.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically, they could have, they really could have delivered those nukes in any form of being that close to our country.
Yeah, I mean, it's a scary situation, Bill, and at this point, this is where JFK decides that he's going to go with the blockade, but what he does, the genius of JFK is he calls it a quarantine, which is less offensive, like less, military wording of it. And
right.
He's going to go with this. And now you would think that maybe his advisors would start to get behind him, but it gets worse, Bill. It actually gets worse because now the Democrats that are here are turning on him as well. And they want full out war. Richard Russell, who would end up on the Warren Commission, who we talked about before, he was LBJ's mentor, one that didn't believe the Warren Commission. But he really starts to get hawkish here. And he says he demands stronger steps than the quarantine. And here's what he says, Bill, exactly. He says, Mr. President, you warned these people. He says, we're at the crossroads. We're either first class or we're not. And JFK says, Senator, we can't invade Cuba. And he says, you're talking about taking one hell of a gamble. And now everyone except JFK and RFK are just going on the offensive. Fulbright is another Democrat, and he was one, Bill, that told you, he was one of the only ones that told JFK, he was supporting him not to send in U.S. military to Bay of Pigs.
Right.
But he's hawkish now, and he's saying, we have to attack Cuba, and at this point, RFK says to JFK, he says, I think if you didn't at least call for the quarantine, that they would have tried to impeach you. He said, because nobody at this point is even remotely talking peace, Bill. And that's the scary thing to me. Like, they're not even talking like it's an option except for JFK and RFK.
Yeah.
And JFK is actually stunned by guys like Russell and Fulbright, and this is where RFK really takes on a role, because the next thing that happens is our good buddy Lyndon Johnson steps in, and Johnson goes full hawkish. And now remember what we talked about at the day of the Kennedy assassination, when Johnson was presented evidence, even though it was fake, that the Russians were involved in the assassination. Johnson didn't want World War III, but now he's full go on this. He wants to attack Cuba. He says we got to be aggressive with the Russians. I mean, this is his vice president. He can't even trust. So, right around this time, Bill, another problem happens. China invades India, and that's a whole other show. That at some point we're going to have to discuss that, because we can't, we don't want to distract from this, the Cuban Missile Crisis. But just imagine the situation JFK is in now. you have China attacking India,
Yeah.
and you have Pakistan, who's already not happy with JFK for forging an alliance with India, and they see their wounded enemy, and they want to take out a wounded enemy. So he's got to keep Pakistan at bay. He's got to be aggressive with China and Mao Zedong, and he doesn't want to make sure that they go any further into India, and he's got to back them down. And he's basically doing this by himself, Billy, because he's got nobody he can trust except his brother.
Right.
And at this point, this is where JFK goes on TV, October 22nd, and the world finds out about what's been going on. Nobody knew up to this point. And when Khrushchev hears the speech, he is furious at his site commanders, Bill, because they didn't camouflage the sites at all. So the U-2 spy planes could see them. And he said that, the Soviets had really no plan, Bill, except for if the missiles were discovered. There was either a sneak attack or they were going to have to retreat, because the higher ups, like in the Kremlin now, start to really question Khrushchev. And we know what would happen to him later. He would basically be pushed out. But they really start to question his leadership at this point, because that was a big screw up, Billy. So JFK gives this great speech, where the world, he's trying to calm the world. Everybody's in panic after hearing this, naturally.
Yeah.
And the day after the speech, we get to the tapes now. And John McCone, who's the CIA director that Kennedy put in after he fired Allen Dulles, he says that there's 19 cargo and 6 tanker ships en route to Cuba from Russia. Defense Secretary McNamara says Admiral Anderson has a plan to intercept both ships. And during this meeting, the U.S. military is raised to Defense Condition 2. Now, Bill, Defense Condition 2 is a level just below that of imminent war.
Right.
So
or
this is
as most people know, a DEFCON.
Yes,
right. Sure. Right.
So, and this is a war, Bill, that could possibly destroy most of the planet. In the U.S., Bill, had dozens of planes, bombers in the air carrying nuclear weapons with pre-assigned targets in the Soviet Union. And they're continuously flying over Canada and Greenland, and they're refueling in the air. So that's how serious the situation is, Bill.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the fact that, John McCone, now he steps in and he says, intel coming in is that Soviet ships are retreating and turning back. Okay. So this is kind of some good news. You think at this point, the advisors would at least start to talk peace, the ships are retreating, let them go. But they get hawkish again, Bill. They still stay hawkish. Like, they start to talk about, how do we retaliate if they cross the quarantine line? Well, why are you even talking about that when they're going the other way? They're retreating, Bill.
Right.
But they're still talking about an attack. And JFK is really, really careful at this point, trying to ensure that the ships that are retreating have a chance to turn around without an incident. And Bill, you talked about, did the Russians have really effective weapons? Well, here's what we know they had. Besides the 50,000 troops there, they had 170 nuclear warheads that we talked about. They had 70 tactical nukes that could be used against an invasion fleet. They had 90 used on long range. They used on missiles or targets on the East Coast. And they also had 7 nuclear submarines, Bill.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and they had really short range, 25 miles range nukes. So any invasion by the U.S., the troops would have been incinerated if they hit with those missiles.
Instantly. Yeah.
Instantly. So no one could debate that JFK not listening to his advisors and going with the quarantine really saved us from nuclear Armageddon. How bad it would have been, I don't know. But think of this scenario, Bill. The short range nukes hit our invasion troops. Then we come back and we hit Cuba. Then Russia has targets in Europe. They start hitting cities in Europe. And then we have the planes in the air. We start hitting Moscow and targets in the Soviet Union. I mean, we know our weapons work, Bill. At some point, there's a disaster. This is a disaster.
It's annihilation. I mean, worldwide annihilation, really. It's just, I mean, to even think, I mean, we wouldn't be here. That's for sure.
I mean, who knows, Billy? Who knows? I mean, this is as close as it's ever came.
Yeah.
And, it's scary when you think about what's going on today, Billy. There's always been forces inside Russia and inside the United States that want a war with the other side.
Yeah.
And they're always going to push that agenda.
Right.
And at this point, Khrushchev announces to Moscow that he told JFK that he would withdraw the missiles from Cuba if the U.S. withdrew the missiles from Turkey. Now, the Turkey missiles are important, Bill. Now, but the thing is, JFK on the tapes, he says, well, this wasn't in the letter. So tensions are kind of high that Khrushchev would actually say this. But the thing about those missiles in Turkey, they were obsolete, Bill. So JFK says, do we still even have those missiles there? I thought we were getting them out. And one of his advisors says, well, they're in the process of being switched out because they're almost obsolete.
What do you mean obsolete? Like they don't work?
They're no good.
Okay.
They're outdated. Who knows how effective they would be if they were used. Right. So they had to swap them out. So this is where JFK would use that. And he said, down the road, we'll talk about that, Bill. Okay. But tensions are really high at this point. So JFK gets a report from U-2 surveillance mission over Cuba that a U-2 plane was shot down. Now you can imagine, Bill, the tension in the room. So RFK says, was the pilot killed? And the response was, the pilot's body is in the plane. So now JFK says, this is escalation by them. And Paul Nitze, one of the advisors who's very hawkish, he steps in and he said, well, the Soviets have fired the first shot. And now the tension is unbelievable, Bill. So Khrushchev isn't happy with this, though, because Kennedy's been trying to reach out to Khrushchev, back channel him, trying to give him a way out, trying to negotiate peace. And he's using RFK to do that. And Khrushchev is like, how does this happen? Like, he didn't give this order, and the thing is, the person that gave the order was Fidel Castro. Right. And he gave the order to shoot the plane down, Bill. And Khrushchev at this point no longer trusts Castro. And, he would later distance himself from Castro. And that would open the door for JFK to step in and negotiate peace with Castro down the road. Because we know the day that Kennedy was assassinated, he had a guy there, a reporter, John Daniel, and he was sitting with Castro negotiating, back channeling from Kennedy. Right. Peace. And when he found out the news Kennedy was assassinated, Castro would say, this is very bad news. Everything is going to change now.
How different would that?
But that was a big mistake by Castro. I mean, he gave that order and, Khrushchev never trusted him anymore. Right. So what happens now, Bill, is with that situation, you can imagine the Hawks. They're ready to go to war. This is it. So Kennedy sends the only person he could trust, Bobby. And Bobby Kennedy at this point is no longer just an attorney general. He's really his key advisor on everything. He's like his national security advisor. He's like his secretary of defense. He's like everything wrapped up into one.
His consigliere, really, right?
He really is, Billy. He really is. He's doing all the back channeling, and he's out there getting messages back to Khrushchev. And, at this point, all night they're negotiating these back channels, and Khrushchev the next day offers to remove the missiles. And, the crisis is diverted. And the only three guys that were really looking out for peace was JFK, RFK, and you got to give Khrushchev credit here too, even though he started the whole thing. Right. Look for a way out. And because let's face it, Bill, if he wasn't, accepting Kennedy's back channeling, there would have been a war, because he would have gave the order and that would have been it. Yep. And the thing is, so what really happened overnight is RFK reached out to Anatoly Dobrynin, And he basically says to him, he says, look, we're gonna remove those missiles from Turkey, which they were gonna do anyway, Bill. And he says, but we won't come out. We're not gonna make it public for like 6 months because we don't want to look like we have to save face. And he says the reason we have to do that is because we're surrounded by hawks. And he says to him, he says, tell Khrushchev that we're not really sure how long we could hold off the Joint Chiefs because there might be a coup to take over the government. Can you imagine that, Billy?
Wow.
Yeah. And he says, this is really the last chance for peace. If Khrushchev wants peace, this is what he's got to do. And it worked, and RFK deserves all the credit, and JFK led us through all this crisis. And, it's just unbelievable, Bill. It's really unbelievable. Because it was so close to disaster, buddy.
Yeah.
And it goes to show you what RFK is. I mean, he's almost like, it's almost like President A and President B, Bill.
Right, exactly.
I mean, he's not your average attorney general. And I think, Bill, at this point, I think the plot to kill Kennedy was hatched right after this. If it wasn't already, like Oliver Stone said, in the wind.
Yeah.
I think at some point, this plan here was because to guys like Alan Dulles, to James Angleton in the CIA, to Curtis LeMay, I mean, Kennedy's a traitor in their eyes.
Yeah.
I mean, he's siding with the Soviet Union. They don't want peace. They want to wipe their enemy out. And to them, he's a traitor.
And you think about, some of the lines from that movie where, they're saying he effed us in Laos, he effed us in Cuba, he effed us in Vietnam, and you can't, I mean, by saying that, meaning he wouldn't let us go to war. He wouldn't, allow potentially millions of lives to be
exactly.
Good.
Exactly.
He wanted peace. And for that, he got assassinated.
And just one thing about Curtis LeMay too, Bill, because his name, he's all over these tapes, and he's just, it's really scary the way this guy thinks. But the day Kennedy was assassinated, we now know from the White House tapes, the White House planes and stuff, the Air Force One planes, I'm sorry, the tapes, Curtis LeMay was supposed to be hunted in Michigan. Okay. And the day Kennedy was assassinated, the Joint Chiefs called all the generals back to be with the body when it came back to DC. And they couldn't find Curtis LeMay. Okay. And his aide, who went with him everywhere, every place this guy went, even when he went on vacation, went with him, was not with him. And he was trying to locate LeMay and he couldn't find them. And finally, on the tapes, you see where Curtis LeMay was. He was in Canada, out of the country, for undisclosed reason, when he was supposed to be in Michigan hunting. And then he ends up, Bill, there was a worker at the Bethesda Hospital where the autopsy was done, Paul O'Connor. And he said that one of the doctors told him, because there's a big gallery, Bill, where they're doing the autopsy. And he says, one of the doctors said to O'Connor, he said, tell that guy up there in the gallery to put that cigar out. He's up there smoking a cigar. And when he went up there, it was Curtis LeMay sitting there, kind of like he just won the lottery, smoking a cigar over Kennedy's dead body.
Victory cigar.
Pretty much.
That's sick.
Yeah, it is. And when you hear him on these tapes, Bill, it's pretty scary. And, the one last thing I want to say is, after this, RFK and Jackie Kennedy would get a message through to Khrushchev through a guy by the name of Walton, who was a family friend. And they would send a message to Khrushchev saying, look, this is after Kennedy was assassinated, I mean. And they would say, the policies are going to change. Lyndon Johnson is not going to be going after the peace that you and my brother were going after. So if you could just stay the course and not give in to Johnson's baiting, and when I get elected president, we'll continue the peace talks and we'll end the Cold War, like JFK wanted to, and he got that message to Khrushchev. Bobby did. So this is just an amazing story, Bill, and it's just how close we came, and what the heck was it really all about, Bill? Yours is bigger than mine, basically.
Right, exactly. And then how long was Khrushchev in power after that? He
It was only like I think like by 64, I think, Bill, he was gone.
Yeah, and then he died not too long after that, right?
Yeah, but he was basically forced out, Bill. They were saying his health was not good, but he
Right.
was forced out, Bill, because the hardliners in the Soviet Union that he was surrounded by, they saw the same way, about him. They felt the same way that the military generals in the U.S. felt about Kennedy.
Yeah.
That Khrushchev was a traitor.
Yeah.
It was really scary situation when you listen to these tapes, and I think there's no doubt that you see the leadership that Kennedy had. I mean, it's incredible leadership. It's just what we're missing today. I mean, it's unbelievable, Bill.
Yeah.
How we saw through this crisis. And then, you got the other crisis going on with China invading India right in the middle of this.
Mm.
And he can't trust any of his advisors because they're all hawkish. And his vice president Johnson is going off, and Democrats that he thought he could trust, like Richard Russell, they're going off.
Yeah.
And they all want war, Bill.
Yeah.
And it was a scary situation, buddy.
It's scary, and it ties in, again today. I mean, Russia is still invading and bullying, and just it's amazing that something
That was going to be a threat, Bill, as long as the people on both sides want war with the other side, Bill.
Yep.
And it's just Kennedy wanted to end the Cold War a long time before it ended.
Yeah. All right, Sean. Well, good job. That was really, really interesting, informative. It's a great, it's a great, piece of history, and I think people our age and younger. I know everybody has heard about the Cuban Missile Crisis, but probably, I think we did a pretty good service today in explaining, or you did anyway, a good service in explaining exactly what it was, what happened. So nice job. Really good.
Well, thanks, buddy. We always try to tell the truth, buddy. And, the one thing is Kennedy was such a leader, buddy. And I hope that comes through on these podcasts because he was really amazing. The more you read about the man, the more it's unbelievable. And I wish these jackals that are out there would stop telling all these lies and stuff and tell the truth about him.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree. Yeah. In fact, I was talking with my brother Jonathan yesterday about, he was asking me about the podcast. He's a big fan too, by the way. Shout out to Jonathan. But
excellent.
He was asking me about, some of the shows that we've done, and he's also a big Kennedy fan. He said, he thinks Kennedy was our greatest president, and not a whole lot. You can't argue with that. There's
I don't have a problem saying that, Bill.
Yeah.
I think he was the greatest president. I mean, in 2 years and 10 months, Bill, he did more than most presidents did in 8. I mean, when you really look at his accomplishments and stop listening to those idiots in the media that say he wasn't in office long enough to do anything. I mean, he did a lot. He accomplished a lot. And when you look at what was thrown at him, Bill, crisis after crisis, and he's basically got one person he could trust, and that's his brother, Bobby.
Yep.
And it's just amazing what he accomplished. And yeah, I have no problem saying it. He was our greatest president.
Yeah.
No doubt about it, buddy.
All right, Sean. Well, we appreciate you guys listening. And again, we talked about it at the top of this episode, but take a look at our website. Just go to that'senoughoutyou.com. Get links there to everything. We got some clips. I'll be adding more to different shows, and our links to our Patreon, links out to all our social media. So check that out. And we will talk to you next time.
Good night, everybody. And when you see us on social media, share those posts. We want to build our base, expand it.
All right. That's enough out of you.
Good night, everybody.